Do you ever feel like there's something missing from your life? A gaping god hole that at another time in human history you would have filled with religion, love, or a sense of purpose? Well, there's not much you can really do about that, but you can fill that gaping personal abyss with stuff. So let's go shopping. Let's go to the mall. These corndog cathedrals of corpulent consumption were central to American life for over 50 years. And yet today, many of them lie in ruin, and those that do survive are teetering on the edge of economic survival. So who killed the American mall, and what's its future in our socially distanced dystopia? Well, to find out, we're gonna have to go back to the very beginning. So steal daddy's credit card, put on your favourite vapourwave mix, and prepare your vision balls for some aesthetics, because today, we're going to the mall. But where did malls come from? In the 1950s, the American economy was healthier than a kid who'd just downed an entire bottle of Flintstones chewable vitamins. Middle-class Americans were richer than they ever had been, and this was all thanks to a nuclear blast and consumer spending. But more than anything, people were buying homes and cars, and they were driving out of the big cities and into the suburbs where they could be alone with all their stuff. With this new population spread out in the suburbs, people were feeling disconnected, like they were living in some human-sized hamster cage. So the first mall was designed by Victor Gruen to bring people together. Being a classical European intellectual, Gruen loved feeling superior to everyone. And how could he do that when there was nobody around? So he envisioned the mall as a social space, a sort of architectural vaccine for suburban ennui. A place to trick these isolated hoarders to re-enter society, with the promise of a gigantic product emporium that also happened to have a roof and air conditioning. Gruen believed that if you started with the shops, eventually people would build museums, medical centres, and even schools. This didn't happen. Instead, he had just built something that would encourage the very habits he was trying to correct. Regardless, the first mall was a hit, and soon architects all over the States were shamelessly bootlegging Gruen's design. Early malls were built as a long, sometimes multi-story chute of shops, bookended by two large anchor stores at either end. Mall architecture formalized immediately, and many of them ended up looking the same. They were middle-class antechambers that protected you from the weather and from the unseemly types who liked to use cities to do stuff that wasn't shopping. A mere 15 years after the first mall had opened its doors, there were 4,500 of them in the USA alone. But their rise had rendered the retail centres of many cities obsolete. Mostly occupied by local independent businesses, they were decimated by the rise of the mall and its legion of cookie-cutter chain stores. Big cities managed, but smaller American towns never really recovered from this loss of custom. And like Dr. Frankenstein, Robert Oppenheimer, and Martin Sheen, the inventor of the mall looked down on his offspring with a cringing sense of failure, with Gruen having this to say about them in an interview in 1976. "I am often called the father of the shopping mall. I would like to take this opportunity to disclaim paternity once and for all. I refuse to pay alimony to those bastard developments. They destroyed our cities." Malls were more profitable when they were built bigger and further out so that they could serve multiple communities, contributing to the social atomization they were designed to cure. If anything, the first malls had made the suburbs even emptier. And early malls had the habit of aging with all the grace of a convenience store condom stored in a sweaty denim wallet. Their copy and paste architecture became a target for the overriding pessimism and paranoia of the 1970s. And this was understandable, as people were losing their jobs, having horrifying acid flashbacks, and Richard Nixon had just shat the presidency to death and flown away on a helicopter. Malls came to be seen as oppressive, mind-numbing fortresses of corporate conformity. Never better exemplified than in George A. Romero's classic zombie satire, Dawn of the Dead, which features this pretty on-the-nose line that basically summarizes the whole film.
They know we're still in here. They're after the place. They don't know why, they just remember. Remember that they want to be in here.
What the hell are they?
They're us, that's all.
But things were about to change, as the first generation of mall freaks passed their corridor shuffling habits onto a new generation. A generation that would usher in the golden age of the mall. In the 1980s, a new enclosed mall was opening in America every 3 or 4 days. This was Generation Plastic, because the rigid featured inhabitants of this decade were compulsively cramming the world's favourite hardened petrochemical into their homes, faces, and wallets. Credit card use in the 1980s was like totally bitchin', supercharging a national pastime into a gnarly obsession. With these debt rectangles, people could cut the line and blow money they didn't have, as well as cut lines of blow and snort it through the money that they did manage to hold on to. But not everyone in the 1980s was coming to the mall to blow fat wads of cash plus interest, as malls were being infested by a new species. Kids who'd grown up riding the escalators all day and shitting out Panda Express orange chicken all night. They were a fashion victim subculture known as the mall rats. These kids would come to the mall with some quarters in their pocket, maybe for a few rounds of Space Invaders or to share a medium fries with friends. But mostly they came to the mall to live, to meet their friends, and maybe someone that they could love, marry, and divorce by 22. In many ways, these kids were the neon-tinted manifestation of Victor Gruen's dream. They had transformed the mall into their public square. This culture was also well documented in the cinema of the time, like in classics of 80s excess like Fast Times at Ridgemont High or Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. But also niche oddities like the Valley Girl apocalypse comedy Night of the Comet or the pun-tacular splatterfest Chopping Mall. And if the mall in all those films looks familiar, that's not surprising because it's the same one, the Sherman Oaks Galleria in Los Angeles. And this mall is special to me. I may never have visited it, but through a childhood obsessed with movies, I feel like I have. Looking at its soft-tinted neon food court fills me with an unaccountable nostalgia. And I'm guessing I'm not the only one. If the early 90s had a motto, it was bigger is better. In the same year that McDonald's added the option to supersize your meal and super clog your arteries, the Mall of America swung open its doors. Not the first, but arguably the most memorable mega mall in the world. The Mall of America is like Mecca for people who like to pointlessly walk around in circles worshipping inanimate objects. But that's selling it short because this new bloated generation of mall also had stuff like go-kart tracks, amusement parks, and this creepy yellow unicycle lad. And what was really radical about their hyper-jumbo double-shot square footage was that they actually had room for small businesses.
And here's something you won't find in any other mall. You can color your own anatomical nightshirt for $14.95.
These Wumbo warehouses were extremely profitable, but their constant construction sowed the seeds for the mall's ultimate downfall. Which brings us to our central question. Who killed America's malls? Well, we'll find out right after these messages.
There's a place for fun in your life, Mall of America.
It was Jeff Bezos. While you might not recognize him because of that brownish mist on top of his usually shiny chrome dome, this is Jeff Bezos in the late 1990s. With his little company called Amazon, you might have heard of it, he started selling books by dial-up, and then set his sights slightly higher and set about conquering the entire world. Jeef Bean Soup's first step was creating a delivery service with the speed and efficiency of a greased Scotsman. How could the mall compete with a website that transformed your front door into the everything store? Online shopping is fast looking like the greatest retail revolution in history, paving the way towards a future of increasing automation. But Jeep Bean Zoops isn't the only culprit in the mall's demise, as his co-conspirator were the malls themselves. The truth is that so many malls were built that they began to cannibalize each other's sales. And no one wanted to live in the urban sprawl that they created around them, so people moved away and their customer base vanished. So, What's happening to these malls today? Well, many malls are being converted into storage units, becoming mass graves for the products that we bought from them, but just can't let go of. Others have been repurposed into the very thing that killed them. Perfect sites for Lex Luthor's Amazon fulfillment gulags. But then, there are dead malls. Like Russian dashcam footage or the rotting corpse of a beached whale, there's something morbidly curious about dead malls that makes you want to take a closer look. YouTube has amassed an enormous catalogue dedicated to the exploration of dead malls, in particular the exceptional work of Dan Bell.
It's just this large, empty mall that used to be, but no longer is.
And it should be noted that there is an unofficial distinction between dead malls and abandoned malls. Dead malls aren't named very well because they're not really dead, it's more like they're in a coma. Essentially non-functional, but still inexplicably clinging to life. And therein lies their appeal. Walking through them is like touring the remains of a ghost town or a fallen civilization like Pompeii. But instead of seeing dead Romans frozen in their final moments of jacking it, you get to see a non-operational Chick-fil-A. And yet, still, it's somehow compelling. These malls exude a spooky, distorted nostalgia that's hard to describe yet impossible to ignore. Then there are abandoned malls, which are like peering into a post-apocalyptic future, but without the danger of running into a gang of flesh-hungry cannibals who wear necklaces made of human ears. Of course, not all malls have suffered such an unfortunate fate. The larger ones, operated by international conglomerates, still attract tourists like flies to a particularly pungent piece of donkey shit. But ordinary malls are struggling. Over 4,000 in-mall stores shuttered in 2019 alone, raising serious questions about how sustainable they are as businesses. Progressively, even functional malls are starting to look like a 20th century hangover. Historical ruins of analog consumerism. Sup! Hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed making it. Next week, the episode's going to be all about the murderous history of the most desired trading cards in the world. So if you want to catch that and catch them all, I recommend subscribing and hitting that bell so that Next Ordinary Thing can be delivered straight to your face. I'd also like to take this moment to thank all of my patrons. You guys are the best. See you later. Bye bye.